Hey folks, this is Matt Rainwater here, and today for our talk and draw, I'm going to be doing some flatting. Now I've done this in the past, but for the talk and draw series, right, this is brand new. And also a lot easier to do. It's a lot easier to talk and draw. I'm not even drawing really. It's a lot easier to talk and flat because flatting is so basic. Like there's just nothing. It doesn't really use a whole lot of brain power. Most of my colors are usually already picked out for me. I just have to, use the old color picker and then get the paint bucket tool and get to work. Doesn't take much. So I've been thinking about what I wanted to talk about, while doing this episode. What was coming to my mind, what was important to me, and very similar to last week's episode, having a lot of feelings, but not really a lot of thoughts. And feelings are always kind of the groundwork to thoughts. The gesture drawing of a thought usually starts as a feeling, I think. This is another way of putting it. And something that does come to mind, over the course of the last couple of days. Something I've been working through or I don't even know if working through is the proper way of saying it. Something that I'm just getting through, allowing to pass, like the weather, is a certain feeling of burnout, which is, I've had it before in the past. It comes and goes. It happens, right? Uh, what is burnout, right? Because you probably have heard artists talk about it. You probably heard a lot of people talk about it. And maybe you yourself have experienced it and couldn't properly put it into words. Burnout is basically when you're so overworked that you get to a point where it becomes like the amount of energy it takes to work is greater than it was previously. It's almost like your oil needs to be changed or something. Like it takes more energy to do the same amount of work that you were doing previously. So I think that makes sense, right? And that's usually indicative of, you need to take a break. You need to step away from work. You need to just recharge the battery, and come back to it with more energy, more stuff. I don't know. Energy is the word I usually go for. It is a very woo term. Now, I'm very comfortable with woo, but not necessarily everybody else is comfortable with woo. But energy is what I'll use, right? I mean, our bodies use energy regardless of whether or not it's a nebulous form of energy, like a spirit, right? I tend to like to use the word spirit to describe a lot of things because I don't know if I believed so much as it makes sense to me, you know. It makes sense to me that we have some sort of je ne sais quoi, a certain spiritual energy that motivates us to do the things that we do, that drives our will, etc., etc. Anyway, this is not a metaphysics workshop that I want to do. Unless that's something you don't want, you certainly let me know in the comments if you want to hear me talk more about metaphysics. Not something I am an expert on, by the way. I am an amateur mystic, maybe even part-time. But I'm definitely not a professional. By no means a professional. And anyway, going back to what I was talking about before I got into that little tangent. Point is like we run out of energy over time. And this tendency also exponentiates as you get older, right? Like, I'm 36, and that is not necessarily old by any means. I'm not even technically middle-aged yet. I'm in this weird middle zone between middle-aged and youth. I'm just a plain bagel, just a regular man. And having to come to terms with this as people start calling me Mister. The person who made my pizza last night referred to me as Mr. Matt, and that made me uncomfortable because I still look at myself as a somewhat boyish young man, and I certainly have that attitude. And it's a little bit disorienting to be referred to in a way that makes me feel like, like my dad, right? That's life. That's growing up. That's maturing. That's unavoidable things like time. So anyway, my point is like, you get older, and that in itself is what is the word I'm looking for? I'm always losing words. This is another thing about getting older. What was I saying? Look, I need more coffee, but I don't drink coffee. That's what I'm saying. Like a lot of people at my age drink a lot of coffee because that's what keeps them awake, that's what keeps them going, that's what keeps them motivated. I came to a reality that, or a realization that coffee is really bad for me. It's really bad for my nerves, like my nervous system. I tend to run on a more tense, maybe more anxious sort of setup. That comes from just being sensitive. Like, and I don't mean this word in its most new agey sense, but like, writers tend to be more empathic, right? I think part of what makes somebody a good writer is that you are more prone to the feelings of others. You're more prone to imagine what others feel. You're even more prone to observe what they're feeling, even feeling it with them at times. And this could be a good or bad thing, right? Because you might find yourself in situations where you are sympathizing with people that you wouldn't normally, or empathizing even, with people that you wouldn't normally empathize with, who might not even have the best intentions for you if you go out of your way to help them, right? So I'm just using that as an example to say, like, what does that mean when I say more sensitive? Because I don't just mean like, oh, I can't handle the slings and arrows of, day-to-day life. That's not what I mean necessarily. I mean, I deal with that. I deal with it. Whether or not I deal with it well is a whole other question, but that's more to say, like, what is it that drains me, right? What is it that makes me, tend towards a more introverted personality? Something that also, like that's also a common trait for a lot of artists. Introversion is very common. I think part of what creates an artistic personality is a tendency towards looking inward, a tendency towards. Oh, come on. Hold on, I'm having technical difficulties. I don't know what's going. Okay, tendency towards like philosophizing or thinking deeply on topics that maybe other people don't look as deeply into. Even going so far as overthinking on a topic, getting in really into the weeds. All these things lend towards artistic personalities. And so, because of this, it is much easier to get worn out by just day-to-day life. And not really, I mean, day-to-day life doesn't really wear me out. What wears me out more so is my schedule, right? The schedule of a webtoon artist is brutal, to put it lightly. I don't have weekends. I haven't. I don't frequently give myself weekends. I think that's a better way of putting it. And when I do, it is treat it like a sacred thing, right? Like I took Saturday off last weekend during for a Mother's Day thing, for a get together. And even then I still worked that day. So even when I'm taking breaks, I'm still working. Like that's kind of the crazy part of it. I never like really step away. And because of that, over time, because making a webtoon is a marathon, it's not a sprint. It is for sure a marathon. And you really have to treat it that way. But over time, I start to kind of lose my pace during certain periods of the creation process. And that's frequently why you may see artists take a hiatus, go on break randomly, suddenly, spontaneously, like even in the middle of a story. Is because they're pushing themselves, and I know that there are other artists who are working way harder than I am working, and I know that I work hard, but I know that there are artists out there who are, they're losing sleep. I like that became for me sleep was something that became a boundary that I would not let be crossed. It just really. For my own personal liveliness, ability to operate on a day-to-day level, that became a boundary that I really drew a line on. But I know that there are artists out there who are, they're not getting a good night's rest. They're probably at best sleeping 4, maybe if they're really lucky, 6 hours, and that builds up over time. It builds up stress, and a lot of times they're also drinking coffee to make up for the missed sleep, and then that in itself becomes a sort of cataclysmic combination, because here's the thing about caffeine. The way caffeine works is it doesn't give you energy. It just makes you forget that you're low energy. It just tricks your brain into thinking that your energy levels are fine, which is why frequently when people have, their caffeine come down, they feel cranky, super cranky. They suddenly realize that they're hungry because caffeine also has a tendency to I don't know what the correct term is for it, but it has a tendency to make you forget or trick you into thinking you're not hungry when you're hungry. As far as drugs go, it's not the most harmful drug in the world, right? It's fine. I'm not here to proselytize some sort of anti-coffee campaign, because I'll drink coffee every once in a while. But when I'm doing it, I'm like, I know the bargain that I'm making with the demon that I'm about to put into my body, right? Which is a very crucial set of skills that anybody who is going to take any sort of drug needs to come to terms with, right? But caffeine, I will use as the what's the word, as the template for this discussion, because caffeine's the one that I think everybody has a familiarity with, and it's one that, it's the world over, right? Like, I lived in Portland for about 7 years, and it's not just Portland, it's the Pacific Northwest in general. There's a Starbucks everywhere. And now, here in Louisiana, there's a Starbucks everywhere as well. Um, what's funnier, too, is just like, I say this because there's like a coffee shop in every corner, wherever you go, pretty much, in this world. Coffee is one of those things that we basically, as humans, decided we can't do without, because we're all overworked all the time, and we simply do not have the energy to make our cars or iPads or whatever, traders, stocks, or banking, whatever it is that you do, human resources, coding. We simply cannot operate without some kind of caffeine. And so we all collectively made this deal with this chemical compound that we could operate civilization at a faster clip. But it came at a cost, right? And the cost is we lose a little bit of our clarity. We lose a little bit of our sense of our bodies. We lose a little bit of our sensitivity to our internal needs at the given moment. And for me and myself, I looked at that, and I looked at sort of the I'm going to use this term, forgive me if it is too woo, but the spiritual economics, right, of that deal. And I just I'm just not interested. I don't really want to be engaged in that kind of bargain, personally. So, anyway, because of that, when I feel burnout, I feel it. And it's not something that I'm just going to, coffee my way through. I'm going to acknowledge it, and I'm going to get the need fulfilled that needs to be fulfilled in that moment. Whether that's I work slower, I work less hours, I pull back, and I take that time to go do more recreational things, or exercise in ways that are not wearing me out so much. Everybody kind of has to figure out what is their recharge, right? Maybe sometimes that's like, for sure legit going on a vacation. Taking a trip. I did that last year. I took a trip to Taos, New Mexico. That was towards the end of season 4. And it really did recharge me. I was hoping it would help. Like, I was hoping that going on that trip would help me sort of reconnect with myself as an artist and figure some things out internally, and I did. Some of it, kind of came in a way I wasn't expecting. But it was a very useful trip, and I'm glad I took it, and I'm glad I got to enjoy and appreciate the beauty and mountainous landscape of of Taos, New Mexico, and in the desert environment that also surrounds it. It's a beautiful place. I recommend it if you ever get a chance to check it out. Anyway, that's just another example, right? And another part of that process for me was also the drive to Taos. Just driving. Because it was from Louisiana to Taos, so it was all, you drive through Texas, and Texas is a giant, giant state, right? And a large portion of Texas, I'm trying to figure out how to describe the landscape of Texas because, going from Louisiana to Houston is swamp, kind of swampland type country. And then from Houston to Austin becomes hill country, which is very different. It's drier. It's more, there's more like prairie land, there's more ranching, that kind of stuff. There's just a lot of grass, some hills thrown out. And then Austin to like Lubbock. Oof, Lubbock. Not to say if any of y'all live in Lubbock, hey, not judging y'all. Lubbock was hard for me though. I don't know. It was a hard stop. But Lubbock in that area is like flat. It's very flat, windy. In sort of for me, it was very desolate in a way. It's weird. There's just some quality to it that was quiet in a way that I found eerie. But anyway, so then Lubbock, into more of West Texas, as you go further and further west in Texas, it becomes more and more high desert, and then you start getting into, into New Mexico, and that's desert, And I like, it's funny because I was kind of just complaining about Lubbock being like desolate and like those parts of New Mexico are even more desolate in that sense. But for some reason, that appeals to me more. Seeing I think it's because, I don't know, I think it's because the terrain was just more, there were mesas and stuff like that. There's stuff that I think interested me in a way. Anyway, I definitely was drawn to wanting to be somewhere around the desert at that time. It was just something in my heart and my spirit, whatever, was drawing me to be in that area. And so I did that, and like I was saying anyway, I was on that drive, and that drive in itself, because it's quiet, it's reflective. When you're driving, you have time to reflect, and in that period of reflection, you pull away from all the stuff that you were feeling anxious about, about the future, right? Stuff about finances or how this or that is going to work out in the future or whatever, You just start thinking about the landscape. Or I do. I just start thinking about the landscape. My mind starts to drift into more philosophical territory, more introverted territory, and in that moment, I call it this wrong. In that moment, my cup starts to refill, so to speak, and that doesn't work for everybody. Everybody has their own different way of recharging, right? That was my method. The method for other people might be different. For some people, their method is going out to the club, dancing, right? Going to a comedy show, going to play video games. Going to, I don't know, there are a lot of different ways, like hanging out with friends. That's definitely for me, it's also a way of recharging. I think what's making it sort of difficult for me right now is I moved into a new place in Baton Rouge, which is a city I've lived in a couple of times, and I know some people here, but like it's not a place I'm necessarily all that familiar with, in the sense that I really haven't lived here long enough to get to know the place that well. like well enough to know where the cool place is to hang out, right? Well enough to feel comfortable 100%. And so in this interim period, as I'm getting used to the place, I've had nights where it's like, oh, I want to be done with work, so I take I'm done with work. But then I'm like, I don't want to stare at a screen. I don't want to play video games right now. I don't want to watch TV. What am I gonna do with myself? That is a challenge. That has been a challenge for me. I'm figuring it out, right? But I'm saying all this to describe sort of like how do I deal with this process of burnout? How do I deal with this process of not having as much energy as I usually do? We all have to figure that out for ourselves, obviously. And what I am working on is just getting more connected with like the arts community in Baton Rouge. Because much to my own surprise, there is one. I mean, I don't know. It's not like there wasn't when I was here originally. It's just it's like a little more. I don't know what the correct word is. It's almost like a secret society kind of thing where you have to find the secret handshake. Which is just to say they're not people here aren't as vocal about it. Maybe they're just not as in touch with. Well, okay, and here's the other thing. I don't use Facebook, so that is definitely for me kind of a barrier, right? Because I know if you have Facebook, it's easy to find anything anywhere going on. But I made a pretty intentional decision at some point in the last couple of years. I'm done, right? I just I don't like it. That's me. Everybody has their own decision to make about what social media they use and their relationship to it. And I just found that the relationship with Facebook was bad. And anyway, that's usually where people post all their stuff. That's why I'm saying all this. So anyway, I've been figuring it out and getting, like today I'm going to go see an artist talk at the Baton Rouge Gallery, a painter. I don't know this painter at all. I'm gonna find out something new about somebody who I don't know anything about. It'll be exciting. And maybe I'll have things to talk about in a later episode in regards to that. But, do I have some aspirations about that or hopes, of like starting maybe more conversations with local artists? We'll see. I'm hesitant about it. I don't know why, but I am. But that's neither here or there. What is here is burnout is frequently also an indicator for artists, for anybody, that the groove you've been in is wearing you out, right? Like you need to change your groove up a little bit. You need to add in new elements, bring in some new information. And that's really ultimately what the conclusion I'm coming to here. And what I want to leave y'all with in a second. If y'all are a creative person out there, and you're going through something similar, you're having a moment where your ideas aren't coming to you as fast as they usually do. Because every artist knows when they're feeling it, right? They're in the groove. They're riding on that steam engine of fun. Just coming up with stuff here. um, you know when you feel it, and you know when you don't feel it. Although it comes in a little slower, right? Like you initially have that moment of, oh, it's not. I don't know, something's off. It's not coming in as fast as it usually does, and then it progresses to you get to a point where it's like, oh, the wind has gone out of my sails. What happened to the wind? And like I was saying before, this whole conversation, there are two ways of dealing with it. You can either just wait for it to pass and sit around and do nothing. But I think that is, um, I think that strategy tends to draw itself out more and tends to get worse in the way that it draws itself out. Like it exacerbates. I was looking for that word. It exacerbates the intensity of that burnout feeling. Or what you do is you go out and have some fun. Break away from it for a second. Come back to it later. Because it'll be there, right? Like, it'll be there. And I think that's what I'm going to leave y'all with ultimately. You know, as my final thought for the day, for this week, whatever, what have you. It'll be there when you come back to it. So anyway, almost done flattening this page. I'm gonna leave y'all with this for the moment, and I'll certainly have more stuff to show you in the near future. Hope you are having a good day wherever y'all are, whatever you're doing. If you're feeling burnout, like I said, take a break. Have some fun for me. And I'll have some fun for you. And we'll have a good time, all right? I'll talk to you later. Bye.